how you can get from intermediate to fluent in 6 months. I'm not kidding you, this actually works. It worked for me. Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's Julie, aka Julesy Two Shoes. And in my last video, I talked about how you have to become a child again in order to become fluent in a second language. And this time I wanted to give you a more concrete playbook of how to accomplish that. So this is going to be inspired by my story. I first came to Korea 13 years ago, and back then I was really poor at Korean, and I just kind of really forced myself to be immersed in the language every single day. And even after I left Korea and I came back later and on and off, I kept doing this the entire time to make sure I never forgot any Korean, and I kept improving over time. So I have basically a playbook for if you are already an intermediate speaker of a language, Korean or otherwise, how you can get from intermediate to fluent in 6 months. I'm not kidding you, this actually works. It worked for me. So I really hope that you enjoy this video. My first actionable point for you to do is to switch your phone setting from your native language to your target language. If it's Korean, switch it to Korean now. So this is going to switch all of the text in your phone to that target language. Like your mail app will now be in Korean, your YouTube, the buttons will be in Korean. Things like if you're on playing a game, maybe like instead of saying like reward, it's going to say reward. Things like that. And this is how you can slowly basically train your brain to relearn the functions of your phone in a new language. And it shouldn't be that tough because you already have been using this phone for quite a long time, I assume. So you actually know what it says most of the time. So this is a really easy way for you to learn words in a new language without actually actively trying. The one thing I would recommend in this is that if this is where you do like 90% of your work or schoolwork, I wouldn't recommend it. So especially since, most people do work on their computers, their laptops, or maybe their iPad, I would not recommend switching this to a target language for 6 months because it might be difficult for you to complete your important work. So this should only be for a phone that you don't necessarily spend most of your time doing work on. Another really helpful tip under this category is a VPN. So this may sound crazy, but this is really funny because I used a VPN for a while and I switched to a Japanese VPN. And then on my YouTube, I started to get like tons of Japanese commercials. And I was just really blown away because it was really funny. You never really notice this, but if you're in a foreign country, you turn on the TV, there are going to be commercials in that language. But nowadays, people don't really watch TV anymore. So I think a VPN is a really interesting idea to kind of immerse yourself in the ads of that country even. Like, you get pop-ups and it'll be in the target language, which, you may not like the ad, but at least you're being exposed to the language in a very natural way. Like this is what a natural native speaker of that language would be seeing on a regular basis. Number 2, actionable point. I think it's really important to actually speak and type and think in Korean regularly. So the best way to do this is with communicating with a native speaker. It's okay if you just journal and things like that, but there's really a lack of feedback. Like you don't really know what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right if you're just doing it yourself. If you speak to a native speaker, they will automatically do something kind of like, they'll say what you said, even if it was incorrect, and then they'll say it again, but correctly. This is something that happens with native speakers or language teachers. It's just natural for them. Like if you say that the word like, I want to go shop outside, the person will respond saying, oh, you want to go shopping outside. They'll say what you said, but they'll change the grammar to make it correct. And this is how you can really level up your language skills quickly in a target language. And also the person who is native speaker will speak to you like they normally speak. So it should be easy for you to just figure out the grammar really quickly. Like, you don't even need to study grammar at this point. If you're an intermediate speaker, you should have a kind of a decent idea of most grammar points. And then if you just speak and listen to native speakers for 6 months, you'll have no problem with this. And so the way to do this is, I'm gonna say, if you have, let's say, like a Korean boyfriend, a girlfriend, a Korean close friend, or even like an acquaintance, or if you're Korean American and you have family members that you haven't spoken to in years, I would kind of rekindle that relationship with these acquaintances or family members, because especially if they're family members, I think they'd be really happy to hear from you. Or if it's like an acquaintance, they might be curious of what you're up to, especially, you're learning Korean now and they can help. I think it's important for these conversations, you tell them upfront, hey, I'm doing a 6-month fluency challenge. And what this means is I'm going to speak to you only in Korean. Because the thing that happens a lot between, let's say, an English native speaker, and someone who is trying to practice English in their native languages, an Asian language or something else, most of the language exchange or just the conversations end up happening in English. Why? Because usually the basically mutually better level of both people is English. So what happens is English just becomes the default language if you do language exchange or just speak to your significant other or family. So what I would recommend is you tell this person upfront, hey, for 6 months, I'm going to speak to you only in Korean, only in Chinese, only in Japanese, whatever language you're learning. And I'm sure they will be actually quite amused and impressed. And I'm sure they would not mind doing it for 6 months. Also, if you do language exchange, I think a really good thing about language exchange is that, you don't need to go to Korea to meet these people that you have no access to. So the good thing about it is that since you don't know them necessarily, you don't have to feel any kind of uncomfortability about practicing your Korean with them. Like, you don't know who they are. You don't have to talk to them ever again after 6 months. So what it is I recommend is basically for a whole conversation, just do it in one language. A really big pet peeve of mine is when people are practicing like a language, like for example, an English speaker and then like a Chinese speaker. Like the English speaker will speak in one sentence in Chinese, and then the Chinese speaker will speak one sentence in English, and then back and forth like that to practice the other language. But I think this is such a terrible way to learn languages because it's not the way the brain works. So for example, I'm fluent in English, Chinese, and Korean. And if somebody, like let's say I'm having a conversation in English and then someone starts speaking to me like just randomly in Korean, I'm going to speak to them in Korean because my brain is intaking Korean, so it's going to think of a response in Korean. It's so unnatural to speak in a conversation and the people are speaking different languages to each other. So I recommend you do not do that. Just stick to one language, hopefully your target language, and try not to, code switch back to English or your native language too much, because that disrupts like the flow of your trying to think in a target language. So that would be my advice on this area. Third actionable point, and I think this is probably going to be the biggest one. It might be the most challenging one, so bear with me. So here is something I like to call exchanging your interests, your expertise in another language. So I think all of us have some kind of interest, right? Like you might really like gaming. You might spend an hour or two gaming every day, or maybe you really like sports. You watch like tennis, you watch like basketball, you just like to watch the commentary. You're not necessarily listening like, intently, but you like the jargon, you're very familiar with the kind of general structure of this kind of thing. Or maybe you read webtoons and you're just obsessed with webtoons. And I think these are all really great passions because it means that you're really, really familiar with these kind of, the way it's structured, like the jargon and things like that. And so I think for 6 months, what you should do is take one of those things that you're really passionate about and then consume that in only the target language. So for example, let's say you really like to watch tennis. You watch like tennis like every day after work, after school, you watch like an hour, 2 hours. It's just really relaxing and fun for you. I would recommend you just, YouTube, Google, whatever, like instead of like tennis match Wimbledon, right? You just search that in Korean, like tennis 대회 Wimbledon. And this, you're gonna watch basically the same thing, but with Korean commentary and with like on the screen, instead of saying like, like deuce or something, it'll have the words and terminology in Korean. So this way you can learn the Korean jargon for the one passion you have. But not only that, if you do this for 6 months, you're not just gonna pick up jargon, you're gonna pick up so many other things as well. And let me just say, especially in Korean, especially for like sports and things like that, things that are kind of like, that came from outside of Korea especially, a lot of the terms are actually just English. There's so many times, because like my boyfriend, he watches tennis regularly, and the Korean commentary is like literally like backhand winner, forehand winner, 이거 net 걸림. So it's like, for example, yeah, like net, the word for net, the net in Korean is just net. Like it's just the tennis net. So you're not gonna learn this unless you're watching these things in the Korean language. So I think it's like such a great thing, a great way for you to do this. And honestly, it may be hard in the beginning, but I think like if you're at an intermediate level and you're trying to go for fluency and you have a 6-month challenge, there is no better way to do this, because you're going to be immersed in something that you already love, and hopefully you'll be able to stick with it for a whole 6 months. I have a bonus challenge for you. This is something that I've heard that works for a lot of language learners. It is basically watching your favorite movie in the target language. So for example, I've seen the movie Up by Pixar at least 5 times. At this point, I think I've memorized the script. I know like what they're gonna say before they even say it. So I actually haven't watched it in Korean, but I think if I watched it in Korean, there'd be not a single word I didn't know, because I already know what they're going to say before they say it. So this is such a great way for you to naturally pick up a second language, especially if you're familiar with the original script and you're so interested in the movie because you've seen it so many times that it's just easy for you to, learn the second language from that. My last things I wanted to say, like if this challenge is too hard for you to do every single day for 6 months, you can kind of do it like a diet. So, intermittent fasting is quite popular these days. And, you may not want to do intermittent fasting every day. I mean, I tried it. I could not do it for longer than a few months. But there's something called a 5-2 intermittent fasting, which means like you do intermittent fasting for 5 days of the week and then 2 days you don't. So you could do the same thing with this challenge. You could do the things that I've mentioned here 5 days of the week and then not do it for 2 days. You can have a rest, which I think you should definitely. So I really hope that the things here have been helpful to you. For me personally, I've been studying Korean, like passively studying for the past 13 years or so. And I wouldn't say I'm a native level speaker, but I'm fluent enough where there's almost nothing you can say to me and I wouldn't understand. And I think that is because I've basically built these systems around me that I'm just exposing myself to the language naturally every single day. And even if I'm not studying, like I'm learning new words every day and I'm just like, oh, that's that. Oh, that's that. Now, like I will never not know those words. And the same thing hopefully for you after these 6 months. So I also made a printout of all of the information here that you can find in my bio. There will be a link and you can just print it and hopefully you can, tape it to your wall or whatever. And hopefully you'll look at it and do these things for 6 months. And please let me know how you feel about this. If you have any suggestions or your personal stories or, your own tips that have worked for you. Yeah, Let me know in the comments below and see you next time.